For each of the systems, you can designate if it's owner or tenant paid, the system category. One thing I do want to note here is if you said, instead of central, you said individual, it'll allow you to name that system, and I'll show you why that's kind of key a little later. But here, major heating system is central gas boiler. System age, again, you'll see that it's done by categories of years instead of a specific year if you aren't quite sure, and then programmable thermostats. So each of these building system windows are very similar. It just asks you for those key data points for each of the systems. And I'll skip to lighting, actually. We've had a lot of great success as far as the accuracy of our lighting estimates. Toby, I think, is going to talk about that a little later. But one thing I wanted to point out here is that, again, we have the owner or tenant paid, the location of the lighting categories, systems. For those of you who've used the tool, you may have noticed that we don't have every single lighting system or configuration under the sun, but we, again, tried to target those that are most common or where you can enter in a configuration that's very similar to what you have in order to get similar estimates of potential savings. But one thing here is you'll note that it asks for the associated heating and cooling systems for where the lighting is located. This is one of my favorite features because it means that the tool is taking into account interactive effects between your HVAC system and your lighting. So where some lighting counts may just point to the kilowatt hour savings, this is also going to provide you with therms that may be lost from those interactive effects. So there's also water fixtures. Here you can enter in percentages as to how many are low flow. It includes faucet, bathroom faucet, kitchen faucet, and shower heads. And then the next one is water conservation. It's politely titled. This actually just asks about your toilets and their makeup. And you'll note that the buttons here are a little bit different when we get to this last screen. Before we leave the screen, I do want to note a few other things. Did you know this button has just some interesting facts about multifamily buildings and energy efficiency and water efficiency? How do I do it? This button will take you directly to the user guide. So if there's anybody who was looking specifically for a separate user guide, it's actually embedded into the tool and can be accessed here, and it opens up a separate Word file. So I'll go ahead and go to the results all measure screen for this building, and we'll start with by measure category. So the tool is going to give you a few, you may receive a few messages here as to when it's doing this calibration process, it thinks there may be potential errors. So this is just to give you some guidance on if you wanted to go back and kind of make additional specifications about certain systems, this is a good place to start. So this is our friendly patience message. We've done a lot of work to get here. This is the part where it takes a little while to get there, but just hold on and you'll get to see the results. One thing I did want to mention, for those of you who have been using the tool or are looking to, or just new to this and join the webinar but are interested in using the tool, we are very much interested in getting your feedback on, how it's going. If you've received any errors, it would be great to know those things. A lot of this is improved through the testing process. So my contact information will be at the end of the webinar, so we would love to hear about it. So this is your results screen, and I'm going to try to scroll slowly in case it skips a little bit, as webinars tend to do. But one thing to note is you'll see the total impact is broken out for both. You get the total, and then it's broken out for owners and tenants. And then these are tied to that same list of building systems that was on the introductory screen and the icons on the EZ path. So we wanted to make this very useful to our owners and building operators. And so this column here is actually toggleable. So it's kind of like a shopping list. And if you say, I don't want to consider a high-efficiency boiler with a programmable thermostat. I just want to see what's the estimated savings for a high-efficiency boiler. You can change that here. And you'll note that when I click yes here, it's going to make this one a no because it's only going to allow you to select one option per system. So I'll scroll down. You'll see that there's a recommended refrigerator upgrade. These are all the lighting systems that were entered and all the recommended measures there. And again, you can do the same thing to kind of update your selections for each of these measures. So all the way through motors and controls, air sealing, duct sealing, and then your water measures. To scroll over for a little bit to show you kind of what the savings numbers look like. So this is your annual savings. It has your electricity, gas, oil, water. You'll see the negatives here for gas, and again, that's because of the interactive effects that I mentioned between HVAC and lighting. Your water estimates, quantities of each of those systems. So for example, your refrigerators, this is a 44-unit property, so it's recommending replacing all 44 to an Energy Star refrigerator. Your total initial cost. I know this is kind of a sticky issue, but we did feel it was important to give an estimate of costs. This estimate is based on RS means with a regional factor. So while it may not be perfect, it does give at least a standard estimate for each of the measures. Your total annual cost savings appears here, and your payback period, estimated useful life, and analysis level. I should mention analysis level. You'll see that most of these are level 1. Level 1 indicates that the information entered was only entered through the EZ path. So that means that the user only entered the basic kind of level 1 information, but you can go back through the advanced path and provide more specifics, and that will increase your level here. So there's levels 1 through 3. A big advantage of the advanced path is the ability to override those assumptions. So in the EZ path, it's making all these assumptions for you based on what year you selected, just kind of the generic boiler you entered. But you can go back and change all of those. So for example, you'll see here that this is the assumed rates for Massachusetts from the very first screen where you selected Massachusetts from the drop-down menu. But if you want to use your own utility rates, you just select yes from this drop-down, and you can enter those here. And the savings will reflect those rates that you've entered. The same for a lot of the lighting systems. So this is all the 17 lighting systems that were entered for this building. And you can add additional data to increase accuracy. So you'll see here that these are all the assumptions related to each of those lighting systems, and you can change your assumption source from those assumptions built into the tool, which are called the EZ Retrofit assumptions, to user inputs, where you enter in your own assumptions if you disagree with what's here. A final note, we will say no here. So these are, again, toggleable. So when you go through and change these to yes, it's a live update. These numbers are changing. It's a little hard to see here just because it doesn't quite fit on the screen at this zoom level, but just wanted to point that out. The other thing to note, while if you click on this and it's not really editable, like I'm clicking all over, and the only column I can change is this one, but you can export to a new workbook. So if you wanted to kind of pull out all this data and manipulate it into kind of different format, you can do so by exporting to new workbook, as well as printing a friendlier version. So that's a little longer for those of you who are on the Green Affordable Housing Coalition call. It's a little longer description, but I do want to leave some time for our other speakers just so you can hear their perspective on the tool. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Toby. And let me see if I can do that fairly quickly.
While Kenley's doing that, I just want to chime in with a couple reminders for folks, and that is feel free to send your questions throughout the presentation using the question box. And also, all the materials will be made available after the webinar so that you can review them kind of and take your time. So they will be made available after the webinar, the PowerPoint, that kind of thing. So just wanted to issue those reminders.
So this is Toby Ast at Preservation of Affordable Housing, also known as POA, the Director of Energy Management for POA. And before I dive in, can folks see my screen? It should say an owner's perspective at the top.
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, I work for Preservation of Affordable Housing. We're a nonprofit owner and developer. We have around 70 properties and 8,500 or so affordable units in 10 states and the District of Columbia. And my job at POA is to try to figure out how to conserve energy and water across the portfolio. And so I've been working with Kenley and SAHF on this EZ Retrofit tool for a while because for me it really provides a quick way for me to look at a building and see if there's an opportunity for efficiency or water conservation at that site. You know, given the number of properties we have and the number of buildings of those properties, it's difficult sometimes to figure out where the opportunities are and how much time to invest in trying to capture some of those savings opportunities. So this tool is very helpful in that regard. So I wanted to just talk briefly. Kenley showed a little bit of the data from a project we did at one of our properties in Danvers, Massachusetts, which is just a little bit north of Boston. It's a fair weather property, 44 units. It's master metered, so we as the owner are paying all of the utilities, gas, electricity, water, and sewer. So there's a good opportunity here for us to try to reduce some of the operating costs at the site through energy and water conservation. So as Kenley mentioned, you can go through the EZ Retrofit tool, and it really helps identify where there are opportunities across the different building systems. And so, oh, I don't want to change my color scheme. Sorry about that. The tool at this particular building identified opportunities in a number of different areas. Concurrently to inputting the information about this property into the EZ Retrofit tool, we were also in the midst of doing an investment grade audit at the property, an investment grade energy audit. So we wanted to see if the energy auditors returned with similar recommendations and ideas to what the EZ Retrofit tool was giving us. And that audit, you know, unlike the EZ Retrofit tool, was not free. And so we wanted to see if the EZ Retrofit tool could provide a good sanity check in looking at the opportunity for conservation that the investment grade auditors also were providing. And you can see here it did pretty well. The EZ Retrofit tool identified opportunities in most of the same areas of the investment grade auditors. The repiping on the domestic hot water, I think, is a fairly arcane efficiency measure that I honestly wouldn't expect the EZ Retrofit tool to identify. And the locking thermostats, I think, were something that we've been looking at in a number of our buildings where we're looking at installing thermostats that have a preset at the factory limit. So they might only be able to go up to 74 or 76 degrees depending on the building. And that, you know, I think is something akin to what a lot of sites accomplish with programmable thermostats. This just offers the owner a little bit more control. But the takeaway here is that the EZ Retrofit tool identified many of the same conservation opportunities that we were able to identify through this investment grade audit, which cost a good amount of time and money to get accomplished. So just as a means of just as a means of comparison on one area of conservation, one thing we looked at in the investment grade audit was the opportunity for installing more energy efficient lighting. And we also looked in EZ Retrofit at this, and you can see in the far left column here, total kilowatt hours saved. EZ Retrofit tool recognized that there was an opportunity to save about 28,000 kilowatt hours a year through the lighting and some sensors that would be installed. It doesn't recommend, it doesn't identify maintenance savings, which is something that our investment grade auditors identified. In addition to the investment grade audit, we also had a second lighting company take a look and see what the opportunity for conservation was, and that's identified as the row labeled Audit 2. And you can see that the number that they came back with, the 26,332 kilowatt hours, is really close to what was identified in the EZ Retrofit tool. And so I think in a lot of ways the EZ Retrofit tool accomplishes what I'm after, is to get a sanity check in the case of if you have a contractor come out and give you a projection of what savings might be. This is another reference point to see, okay, is it sort of in the ballpark? And it helped in the investment grade audit, the row labeled original, because when that number came back, it was almost twice what EZ Retrofit was recommending, and that really sort of raised a flag with us. Kenley was helping review some of these numbers for us as well, and so we were able to go back to the auditor and say, this number that you're suggesting in terms of energy savings doesn't seem reasonable based on some of the measures. And they went back and they had to do some revisions and came up with a more realistic projection, which brought it down to around 33,000 kilowatt hours. So in that respect, it's a very helpful tool to get a sanity check. The other things I would talk about in terms of the value we're seeing in using the tool, generally we're finding it to be just a good repository to gather a lot of information that is out there about your buildings, but often exists in a lot of disparate sources. You might have some of this information in the capital needs assessment. You might have the site might maintain appliance logs. You've got utility data, which might be stored in a different area. And this is a good way to bring all of that information together to try to see if there are opportunities for conservation. And it also, for me, honestly, has become, sort of a reference on if I need to quickly look up something about Fairweather Danvers, I can go into the spreadsheet and quickly pull that information as opposed to, maybe sifting through a CNA or some other source. The other thing I would say, and how we're looking at the potential for rolling this out across the portfolio, is using it as a good tool to engage the site property management staff and maintenance staff. A lot of those folks are calling me and saying, we'd like to do some efficiency improvements at our site. And so now I have this tool that I can say to them, well, let's fill this out. We'll work together to get the EZ Retrofit tool completed, and then we'll see what sort of opportunities there are. And if the tool comes back and says there's a good opportunity for lighting or water conservation or something on the heating side, then we can do some additional investigation and figure out if maybe there's an opportunity to work with a local utility or some other resources, perhaps in the capital plan for the building to try to capture some of those savings. So I think that's a really valuable aspect of it. The other thing that I've been thinking about more recently in terms of the tool is, we are often buying new buildings to add to the portfolio, and I was thinking that this would be a helpful tool for me in that process. At this point, I spend a good amount of time looking at utility data and capital needs assessments from buildings that we might be looking at purchasing and trying to figure out where the opportunities are. But this would help me in that. Oh, went too far. This would help me in that regard as well to get a better sense of what we're getting ourselves into and where the opportunities might be if we're doing a moderate rehab, to put some dollars in for conservation and really try to save some money on the operating side going forward. So that's really sort of a quick rundown on some of the ways that we're using the tool. I found it to be very valuable, and I'm certainly, happy to answer some questions at the end about it. But I will now turn it over to Mark to take us out here.
All right, thanks, Toby. Yeah, so let me just skip ahead to my slides here. Yeah, so my name is Mark Pando. I'm an energy engineer for a company called Bright Power. We're an energy efficiency consulting firm based out of New York City, and we've been working on kind of providing some additional guidance to SAHF and helping develop this tool and providing some technical assistance. And I apologize if this, let me try to get this window out of the way here. I just want to talk to kind of some of the advantages of the EZ Retrofit tool and what it was kind of designed to do. As Toby spoke to and as Kenley mentioned, the idea overall is to provide a free tool to property stakeholders. As an energy engineer myself, I'm doing energy audits all the time, and the truth of the matter is it's expensive to get someone like me on site. So the idea of the tool is to input kind of some of my expertise, or people like me, our expertise in energy efficiency and building systems, into a tool designed to be, applicable, to buildings across the country. So the idea here is really to use the tool to identify properties that have good opportunity. The target user for the tool is someone like Toby, who's in charge of a number of properties. And the idea is to basically use this free tool to input say input 20 buildings into the tool, and then pick the five buildings that the tool says has good opportunity. So once you do that, once you run through the tool and kind of see which buildings may or may not have energy savings potential, it's important to know what the outputs of the tool really mean. The idea here is to provide really a rough estimate, order of magnitude estimate of savings. Certain measures in the tool are more accurate than others, as you could expect. For example, like we said, the lighting is very good. The low-flow fixtures are also pretty good. Those are pretty standard energy efficiency measures. But one of the things we also wanted to implement in providing this tool, beyond kind of the basic low-hanging fruit like lighting and plumbing fixtures, is to provide a little bit more complex calculations on the back end. Kenley alluded to this before. Most of the HVAC savings calculations are actually calibrated to the utility input, the utility usage data that you input into the tool at the very beginning. Part of that, it's also, whether normalization comes into effect. So the idea is to capture a little bit higher degree of precision in these savings calculations than is typically available especially in like free tools that you may download from Energy Star or a manufacturer's website or something like that. The Danvers Audit is kind of the perfect case study of how, one, the tool is kind of designed to be used in that it provides a sanity check against, not only against energy audit results, but really in advance of whether or not you should be paying someone to audit your building. But the Danvers Audit also shows that the tool really is capturing a significant portion of the opportunities at a building. Obviously, there's certain things like Toby mentioned, that DHW piping that you can't really put into a spreadsheet-based kind of prescriptive tool like this, and that's where the value of having, an audit, paying for an audit really comes into play, is those kind of more arcane, detailed things. So, I mean, I could talk more about the back-end calculations. I know we're running, we're kind of starting to run out of time here. I know we want to leave some time for questions at the end. So I'm actually gonna cut out. Rebecca, if you want to take over with those questions, we can start to answer those. Here's everyone's contact information, all the presenters here today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us directly. And Rebecca, let me just hand this back over to you.
Perfect. I'm just going to pull up that last slide. Oh. And we have one question to start, which is, there is a 7-story building that has 3 laundry rooms on 3 different floors. Can you add the 3 laundry rooms in the Easy Path option of the tool, Kenley?
Yes. So it's entered into 2 different sections, actually. So there's an initial question on the benchmarking screen about laundry, and it just says, is there central laundry? So for your building, you would just say yes there. But then when you get to the actual clothes washer screen, there's a button at the bottom, and it says add another clothes washer. And it's also, this is the way, let's say you had 20 clothes washers in your building, and 10 were 10 years ago in non-Energy Star, and 10 were brand new in Energy Star. You could break those out separately by adding 2 different sections. So you would enter in, fill out all the tabs for the first set, and then say add another set of clothes washers, and then you would enter in all the fields for the second set. So you can parse that out as best reflects kind of the setup in your building.
And then we have a second question about how old is the software, and then do you expect to continuously maintain it so it can be a long-term investment for properties?
So that's a great question. As we are funded through a HUD grant, the initial grant term was through May 6th of 2014, and then HUD gave us a 1-year extension, so it's through May 6th of 2015. So there's an email address, ezretrofit@safenet.org, for if you have any questions or just feedback, tool issues, things like that. We would love to gather that information. Our hope is that we can continue tool development and create version 2 and release it by May 6th. We are actually looking for additional properties who are using the tool and completing retrofits in order to achieve our matching goal under the project. So if anybody has any projects that fall under that category, we'd love to hear about it, and that will mean that we have kind of frees up additional funding towards version 2. But again, it is non-proprietary. When the grant term is over, it will be on our website. I think HUD will also post it on their website. And the hope is that someone else will pick it up and kind of continue to carry the ball forward.
I'd just like to add one more thing on that, is that the tool itself is actually just an Excel download. So after you've downloaded it, it's entirely on your hard drive, so there's no there's not like a central server that it's pulling from at any point. So the threat of of support in the future being pulled away is a little bit less. You'll still have the EZ Retrofit tool in a usable format.
And I should mention there is a sign-up as well on the SAHF website if you are interested in receiving updates as they're made. So we're actually at version, I think, 1.02. There were a couple of issues that we've resolved even since the May 6th posting.
Great, that's great. And just to reiterate something you said previously in response to a question, SAHF is operating under a grant that has been extended to May 6th, 2015, but the tool will be re-released kind of as an outcome of that grant, so in response to that question. And then I did get a question about how are costs changing over time.
No,
that's all, sorry.
Okay. So this is a great question, and I think it speaks to kind of one of the other components of the tool itself. So you'll note that there's a lot of assumptions that are built in, but we really wanted to provide the user with the ability to change those assumptions wherever possible. So for example, costs, you can override those and enter in your own costs. So say, for example, you run the tool, you say, oh, this building has a great opportunity for additional efficiency measures. Maybe you decide to do that without an investment grade audit. Maybe the property is of a size where an investment grade audit makes sense. But once you receive additional information about the cost of those measures, you can enter those in. So say you receive a contractor's bid, you can override those cost estimates in order to kind of keep this as an ever-changing picture of your project. There's also the capacity to enter in incentive amounts. It's back in that additional data to increase accuracy and adding user inputs. If your property is located somewhere where there are incentives, you can enter those in as well so that those can be taken into account.
Thanks for that, Kenley. That's really helpful. It's good to know that you can put the incentives in and get a sense of how that impacts what you're doing. I just got a question that I'm going to take a stab at answering, but Kenley, please correct me if I misspeak about sending the EZ tool to everyone on the webinar. And I think the answer is because it's something that you download, we will send around the link to where you can go and access the tool, but probably will not be sending it as an attachment because of the size.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's pretty easy. It's just safenet.org/ezretrofit.html. If you go to the SAHF website and then click on our energy conservation tab at the top, it should take you right there. You should see it, but if not, please email me if you have any trouble finding it. And you can download it as many times as you want. As Mark mentioned, it is just a separate Excel file. One thing I would note is that when you download it from our website, it's a blank tool, so you'd have to enter in, everything from scratch. But, the property, the Danvers property, Toby mentioned it's one of the Fairweathers, so it's one of 4 very similar buildings. So if you wanted to create a separate file for each of those buildings, you could just go back in and make the adjustments necessary to reflect the differences between the 4, and you could save them as 4 separate files. To reflect, the actual conditions at each of those similar properties.
That's a great point to try and cut down a little bit on data entry. You can just borrow from similar projects if they're working on similar projects. So more of a technical question about the tool itself. Are there system limitations in terms of 64-bit versus other kinds of systems? One of our attendees isn't able to use the tool. So I didn't know if that's something you'd run into before.
That's a great question. I can't remember off the top of my head as far as 64 versus 32, but there are minimum system requirements. I think we've listed them on our website just as far as it is only PCs, and you do need a recent version of Microsoft Office. I can't remember exactly which version, but I think it's 2010. But I have received that feedback about the 64-bit issue, and I'm investigating that further. So I'll try to post an update when I receive feedback on how to resolve that.
That's great. So the technical requirements are just on the EZ Retrofit page,
right,
on your website. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm not seeing any more questions come in at the moment. If anyone on the webinar does have a question, please send it our way, and we're happy to answer it. We do have a couple minutes, so we can take additional questions if you have any.
Yeah, and the other thing I would mention is just to reiterate, I would be really curious. We had, over 100 people on this call today. Just, your level of interest, if you've used the tool, just more feedback about how you've used it. We would love to have as much of that information as possible.
So we did get an additional question asking about what about additional space requirements in the building. I'm assuming if it's not all residential, like a mixed use.
That's a great question, and I have to say I think there is the possibility under, it's kind of one of these very advanced issues in the advanced path to kind of partition out your building envelope. My suggestion is to include those mixed-use building kind of areas. If there's a way to go ahead and include it and then designate it, you can write location notes and then the kind of type of room it is, and it'll be included as one of the areas as you receive your results. But that's a great question, and something I think we should investigate as we look into improving the tool, hopefully for version 2.
So additional space requirements, even if they were a different kind of residential, would be in the advanced path option? Is that where you would get to input that data?
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, that's you can adjust your building envelope if you have. This came up if you had a building with kind of 2 separate sections, where one section was older with a certain type of construction and one section was newer. You could do that. So I think there's a couple different ways to do that. If the person who sent in the question wants to send me more details, I'd be happy to look into it.
And would you consider geothermal as an improvement?
Geothermal is not one of the listed improvements. So in other renewable sources, we've considered that, and it may be something that's still on the table if we can go forward with version 2. But for version 1, we really wanted to focus on those elements that are most common to the multifamily affordable sector. And since geothermal can be kind of a one-off or a specialized setup, we didn't feel like it had the kind of width and breadth in this community that we included it for version 1.
Yep. One other thing on geothermal is that it's very dependent on kind of the landscape layout of your property and how much room you may or may not have. And we didn't want to, because we want to be all-inclusive, we didn't want to start recommending geothermal in, for example, like a building in New York City, there's no space. A building in the middle of Boston, there's really no space to bury all that piping. So we chose, instead of having that recommended all over the place, start adding one more input to kind of have the user decide if there's enough space, which isn't really a great solution. We decided not to include it.
That's great feedback. Well, I think I will go ahead and close this out. I'm not seeing any additional questions, but just to reiterate yet one more time what Kenley said, if you do have questions about the tool, please reach out. to Kenley, to Toby, to Mark, especially if you're looking for more of that owner perspective or the engineer perspective. And if you're interested in using the tool, testing the tool, and giving feedback, please reach out to Kenley. And I will send an email out by the end of the week with all of the webinar materials, with the presentation, with the link, as I'm seeing some questions come in about where the tool is. Just a reminder, it's safe. Oh, no, I'm going to mess it up. Kenley, where's the tool located again? Sorry.
So it's safenet.org. If it's easier for you to just go to our main page, and then you click on energy conservation, and it's a tab at the top, so EZ Retrofit Tool. Or you can go to safenet.org/ezretrofit.html, and it's on the last slide of the presentation too.
Yes, I see that now. I was blocked by my question box. So thank you to Kenley, to Mark, and to Toby. This was great, really informative and really useful to get a walk through the tool and get kind of a true-to-life perspective on what it's like to use the tool on a project. So thank you for that, and I'm sure you're going to get lots of follow-up emails. So thank you so much. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks to National Housing Conference.